Not yet. All right, one more time.
It did just do something.
No.
Hold, please. I'm using a new computer, guys. All right, try it now.
Nope. Is it something on my side?
We're fixing to find out. Now try it.
Nope.
How do we go from it working to not working?
I don't know.
Hold on, I'm trying to find settings. You might have to go back to your Google.
All right. You want me to do that?
Yeah, because I have no clue why it's not working because everything is on. Or hey, just log off and log back in. See if that'll work for you.
All right.
Literally, guys, we just did this before everybody got on. We got everything fixed. The joy of technology. All right, Greg's signing back in, so just give him a second.
John, you there?
Everybody else is coming in. Yeah, I can hear you.
All right.
Now try it.
Okay, it's going to work.
Good.
All right, stand by. Now.
Google must be updating the system.
Damn.
What's it doing, Greg?
It's telling me that I need to grant permission. Let me close out Google, or not Google. Let me close out the PowerPoint.
And I'm not a whole lot of help to you because I got a new computer that's locked up. Or not locked up, but doesn't have everything.
Well, we had it. Now I just lost it again.
The ability to do that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's telling me that you must grant permission in order to screen share. I'm not sure.
Well, and guys, just let y'all know it's already interrupted Greg and John. Parnell will be on soon. I had to take care of some stuff, but he'll be on as soon as he can. He'll definitely be on for the 9 o'clock for sure.
All right. What browser are you using, Greg?
I'm using Firefox.
Okay.
I can try
Go
Chrome.
to Google and try Chrome. Can you email? Never mind, because it's not working for me. Because I don't have PowerPoint. I was gonna say email it to me. Let me see if I can get the other computer up and running. Maybe I can help more.
An opinion on the subject.
We'll take the screen share now.
There it is. It's up.
It's up, Greg.
And now
Yeah, but I think he left the meeting.
Fantastic deal. That's an opinion.
John, we've got it right now.
Yeah, I'm seeing what y'all are seeing, but I think Greg may have logged out. No, he's presenting, so he's got to be there. Greg, can you hear us? We could see you.
John Owens, how many have we got on so far, roughly?
30.
Thanks, sir.
All right. How about that?
I can hear you and I can see it, but it's not in that slideshow presenter view.
Stand by. How's that?
Yeah, it's not going to work unless you log out and log back. You do that window thing.
Caramba.
But we can see it fine.
You can see it fine?
Yeah.
All right, then let's just go with this. I'll try and. Okay, how's that? Is that readable?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so tonight's presentation, as I understand it, we have two webinars for tonight. 7:30, I know we're running a little bit late. We'll talk about the exam that's coming out tomorrow, I believe. That won't take too long, maybe about 40 minutes, 45 minutes tops. And then we can take a break, however you want to take a break. And then at 9 o'clock, it's our normal clinic. And I believe tonight we're going to have Tom Honick. Tom Honick is a MILB senior instructor. He's also a Division I regional. I'm not sure if he's a super regional guy yet, but he's definitely a 2 to 3 time regional umpire. So he's going to give us a presentation on some nuances and some common mistakes on two-man mechanics. So we'll see Tom at 9 o'clock. So for now, let's go ahead and talk about the exam, which is going to come out tomorrow. So there are some resources that are available to all of us. And for those of us who have taken these exams, I don't think anything is going to be a surprise this year than it was last year. For some of the newer guys, there are some helpful hints here that will help you get through the exam a little bit easier and maybe a little bit faster. So we'll go through a couple of those. And then what I've done is I've pulled out what I think are some of the harder questions that we might see in this year's exam. So one of the things I would recommend is if you don't have one already, I would recommend you download a PDF version of the rule book. If there's the link that I'm showing now, if for some reason that link doesn't work, or if you just want to simply email me, you're more than welcome to do that. Email me and I will email back to you a PDF version of the rule book. And the reason why you would want to have one on your laptop or on your PC is that it allows you to go in and do a search. So if you're doing your exam, or if you have a need, want, or desire to look something else up in the soft copy version of the rule book, it has a search function that allows you to do that, and we'll go through that tonight. So if you're taking this exam for the first time, or maybe it's even your second year, again, for those of us who've taken this exam over and over again, we kind of know what the drill is. But for the new guys, there is an approach I would recommend that you consider as you take the exam. A couple suggestions. What I normally do, and this is just me, you don't have to do this, is that I will go ahead and cut and paste, take the exam and cut and paste it into a Word document. This way it gives me an opportunity to work on the exam offline if I want to do that. Plus the online exam times out after a certain amount of inactivity. And then I also save the exam. So for every exam that I've taken over the years, I actually have copies of every exam that I've taken. So your choice, your call as to whether you want to do that. I think it offers some benefit. Obviously, I think this year, like last year, I'm expecting 100 questions. So I don't think we're going to be able to do this in one sitting. And if you do, you're going to get tired. So there's no rush. I think we have weeks for sure to take the exam, and maybe a month or a little bit longer to do that.
It's
So-
the day before the season begins. So it's whatever the day. It's like the day or two before the season begins. Aaron knows it better than I do.
Okay, so that's about at least 3 weeks. So if you have the time, don't rush. And then the other suggestion is make sure you read the whole question before you jump to a particular answer, because some of these questions, and I think I have a few examples tonight, there are some nuances that you might miss if you read the question too early. And for anyone, you're more than welcome to give me a call or to give a fellow umpire a call if you want to run a question by someone. I know Mike will offer any of us up as a resource to help any of you guys out. So I talked about the PDF rule book. I strongly recommend you have one, and what it does for you is it allows you to maybe speed up your work a little bit. So here's as an example. You know, we have an exam question that talks about, you know, pitching and replacing the pitcher prior to. What I would recommend is in your soft copy version of the PDF is you take a component of either the question, or if you think you know what the answer is, take a couple words from that answer and then do that, copy and paste that into the PDF search function. So that way it'll pull up a particular rule reference that is relevant to your exam question. So here's an example. You know, we have pitcher is going to be is replaced during or prior to an inning. The relief pitcher may not use more than 8 throws completed, and then it gives you A, B, C, D as your options for your answers. You can either do one of two things: either take a part of the question and copy it and paste it into the search box, or you can take a set of words from what you might think is your best answer and do the same thing, and then run it through the search engine, if you will, and up will come up what hopefully will be a rule reference. So here's an example from our first question. I put it into the search box. Find more than 8 throws. That was part of the question. Or I took a component of the answer time from the first throw, you put it into the search box, and up comes the relevant rule reference associated with that particular question. So that allows you to kind of get through the exam a little bit faster, a little bit easier, and it's a good resource. So I strongly recommend that you consider
Hey,
doing
Greg,
this. Yes,
can I
John.
interrupt you for 30 seconds?
Mm-hmm.
Also, all of you should have received, if you have on your phone the NFHS app, it's called NFHS Rules. It has a searchable PDF, and it has a rule book on your phone with an interactive table of contents that you can do the same thing. So if you don't have the PDF, then you have that on the phone. You need to log in with it using your whatever email address you use to log in to Dragonfly. But that rule book should be available on NFHS Rules. It's provided free of charge by the state of North Carolina.
Thank you, John. Yeah, so there are a couple of ways to do that. Again, either the PDF or through John's
Eric,
method.
you had
But
a question.
again, having a soft copy is good.
Yeah, test opens tomorrow and ends April 25th. Just a heads up.
Okay, so that's about a month. So today's the 28th and it closes on the 25th. So that's plenty of time for us to take the exam. Another piece of tidbit, you know, whenever I cut and paste and put everything into a Word document, I do a split screen. It's just an easier way to go back and forth between my reference source, which is my PDF, and my actual test, which is my Word document. Again, you can choose to do what is more comfortable for you guys. For me, this kind of works pretty well, and it kind of gets me through the exam a little bit faster than doing other things. So just some tidbits of information. Another method in going through the exam is a process of elimination. So here's an example. The assistant coach directs some extreme profanity at our base umpire that is heard by the dugout. Now, if I had the animation that we had working before this meeting, you would see through a process of elimination, I can go ahead and start ruling out some of the multiple choice questions. You know, in this particular example, B and D are non-starters because they are not penalties. And if a coach is going to use some extreme profanity, he has now crossed the line and his behavior is unacceptable and he needs to be penalized. So B and D are non-starters as an example. Option C, extreme profanity, allows for us to immediately go to an ejection without a warning. And the graph that I have here is we use a graduated approach when we try and manage coaches, assistant or head coaches' behavior. You know, we try and request, then we try and remind. Once those have been unsuccessful for whatever reason, we then issue our written warning, and then from there we go to an ejection. So I believe Mike is a big proponent of this graduated approach, but as in our exam question, if he has gone VFR direct to extreme profanity, we can skip some of these intermediate steps and just go ahead and issue an ejection. So try and use the process of elimination method, and hopefully it'll take a multiple choice question, which is 1 out of 4, and it may get you down to a 50-50 split, and then use your word search function in the PDF version of the rule book and hopefully come up with the right answer.
Hey, Greg,
Yes.
just a heads up. I know y'all know this, but just remember what Mike said. Everything is an ejection until it gets to him. So if something happens, remember everything is an ejection until it gets to Parnell. That's all.
All right. Thank you. Here's another example here for process of elimination. A couple things here is I highlighted face the first batter. Okay, so for me, if I'm unsure, I'd probably use that part of the question to go into my PDF and do a search and see what comes up on face the first batter. And then I might find an applicable rule if I'm unsure. And then the process of elimination, again, here B and D are non-starters because they are not penalties. And in this particular situation, Jones, the starting pitcher, is being removed, and we believe because he's failing to meet a requirement. What requirement is that? So you go through a process of elimination. B and D are out. A is out because Jones at this point is still a legal substitute. So more than likely, the answer to this question would be C. He can return and play another position, but he may not come back and pitch because I believe the rule states that he must face at least one batter unless it's injury related. Well, even if it is injury related, he can't come back and pitch. And then our last example of process of elimination, if a player is on the bench and leaves the bench area during a fight. Again, I tried to highlight leaves the bench area during a fight. That might be a key phrase for our search in our PDF. And then process of elimination, we're going to eliminate C. Threatening gestures is irrelevant because the issue is he's leaving the bench area, which he should not do. And I'm pretty sure most of us know this. D is non-starter because it's a multiple choice question, and if C doesn't work, then obviously D doesn't work. So we're eventually left with 2 choices, and the right choice is he's ejected because, you know, the high school rules put a great emphasis on, you know, conduct and fights, and they're very explicit as to what we are required to do if someone were to leave the bench area during a fight. And there's our rule reference below. Another tidbit here, again, maybe this is more for the newer guys, not the guys who've been around for a while, is you might want to consider as you answer your question as a reinforcement technique to go ahead and do a rule citation. So here we have a question about a coach's conduct and whether or not we can eject the coach. and we go through our process of elimination. We go through our search. For me, I like B, no warning maybe, or no, a warning may be verbal or written, because again, if you remember in one of our previous charts, you can eject a coach immediately if the act deserves it. But in this particular question, you know, he's complaining about the officiating. Okay, that's fine. And hopefully we did something when those complaints were expressed the first or second time. But this doesn't really warrant an ejection without a warning. So B would be the correct answer. And then if you want to go ahead and cite the rule, then you go into the rule book and you go ahead and do a simple rule citation as a positive reinforcement mechanism. Now, if you really want to go overboard, because you have a PDF and you can cut and paste, you can actually go in the rule book and cite not only just the rule, but go ahead and cite the actual language. So this is just another example of a greater in-depth for rule citation. You don't have to do this, but again, maybe for some of the newer guys, this would help you in terms of reinforcing what you're learning in the exam and what you're picking out of the rule book. It's a lot of work, granted, and it makes it a little bit more time consuming, but there are some positive attributes to it. Okay, so those are some of the suggestions, ideas as to how to take the exam. Now, what I've done is I've gone in. The Federation exam is out in other states. I actually umpire in the state of Virginia as well as North Carolina. I've already taken the 2021 exam in Virginia. Tomorrow I'll take the North Carolina exam. I am presuming those questions come from the same pool. So what I did was I pulled out a number of what I thought were the more difficult questions. I think we're going to get 100. We got 100 questions last year, so I anticipate us getting 100 this year. So I pulled out roughly about maybe 25 questions that we can go through quickly as to some of the nuances in the language, and these are, I think, the more harder ones out of the exam that we might see this year. Just to let everyone know, so if it is 100 questions like it was last year, this is the breakdown that I've seen so far in terms of the questions. It doesn't really help us, but I just thought I'd throw it out there. Most of the questions, believe it or not, are coming in the Rule 3 section of the book, you know, the substitution and the conduct. So we'll see a lot of those questions, and I have a couple of those to present tonight. And then the rest, I want to say, is probably evenly distributed amongst the other rules. This doesn't really help you, but it kind of gives you an idea as to how they devised the test for 2021. The exam, from what I've seen, generally fall into two simple categories, either a simple true false, and I think this year we may only get about 4 of those. Then we get into the multiple choice. And there are several different types of multiple choice. One is only one correct answer, and that's going to be about maybe 75% of the exam, where it's A, B, C, D, and you pick one of those 4 options. There are a couple questions where more than one answer is correct, whether if it's, as an example, A and C or B and D, you know, any combination thereof. But just remember, if you want to select that answer, both have to be true in order for you to get the answer correct. Then there's a couple out there that all of the above. And again, if you're going to select all the above, then all of the answers that are being proposed in the question have to be true. And then I think there's only one out there where it's none of the above, where none of the answers are true. So then all answers must be false. And then from what I've seen, I only saw, I think, 3 DH questions that are directly related to the new 2020 player DH rule that came out last year. So I think there's only 3 of those. So in all, that's the overall structure of the exam. So I thought I'd start with some of the simple true false stuff. So right off the bat, we get a 50-50 chance at the correct answer. So what I've highlighted in the yellow box is if we're going to use our soft copy search function, these are probably the words I would choose out of the question to do a search in the rule book. In our first example, follow through interference, I think I'd take the no attempt to advance. You can choose other parts of the question, but I would choose that part. I've taken exams a number of times. I think I know what to look for. In our second one, further play could jeopardize an injured player's safety. So I think I would search on jeopardize. And you want to find something that's unique, because if you go in and search, let's just say for the word ball, well, there could be 1,000 entries on the word ball. But if you go into the rule book and you look for jeopardize, you're not going to find too many rule references that are associated with that. So try and pick a component of the question that kind of narrows that search down a lot. So I highlighted those in the yellow box. So for our first one, we're talking about follow through interference, no attempt to advance. The purpose of this question is when we have follow through interference and we have a runner stealing, we're going to, I think we've covered this in one of our webinars, that's going to be a delayed ball situation. We're going to allow the catcher the opportunity for a put out, and remember that put out could be anywhere. If you have multiple runners, it could be on R2 or it could be on R1. So we're going to allow for the put out. But what happens if our runners on base are not attempting to advance? So that's the whole purpose of this question. Are we going to do something if there's no potential for an advancement by any of our base runners? So if there's no advancement, then there's no protection required. And if there's no protection required, then there's no penalty for follow through interference. So that's really the whole purpose of this question, is to recognize that follow through interference is called to protect the catcher for a put out. But if no put out exists, then we don't need to protect the catcher. The second question, I think we've all been around long enough to know that, you know, player safety is number one. So if further play could jeopardize that, I think we all know that we would kill that play and we would call time immediately. Here's one of the three questions that has to deal with the player DH. You know, we have Sanders, the right field DH, and again, the player DH can be a player DH for any of the positions, F1 through F9. In the sixth inning, the coach wants Healy to play right field and have Sanders continue to be the DH. We're actually going to cover this in a future webinar as to whether or not we make offensive changes, what happens. When we make defensive changes, what happens. This is a defensive change, and I think most of us would know that for a defensive change, that's not going to affect the role of the DH. So for us, true would be a good answer. The role of the defensive player may be substituted for by any legal substitution without impacting the DH component of the player DH. And then the last true false, if a runner correctly touches a base that he missed, either in advancing or returning. And again, I highlighted advancing or returning because I think that's a key phrase in the question. So the issue is whether or not he can correct a mistake by his last time by. So if he misses second in advancing to third and he retreats back to first, and in retreating back to first, he touches second, he has touched second on his last time by, therefore correcting any previous running error. This was a rule that was put in place, I want to say about maybe 7 years ago. That's now allowing base runners to correct a previous mistake. So there's your rule reference, and if he's allowed to do that, then obviously we would answer true for that question. So I think that's the sum of all of the true false questions that we're going to see this year. Could be wrong, but I kind of think that this is what we're going to get and what we're going to expect. So I'll go ahead and stop because we're now going to transition into the multiple choice arena, and we're going to cut this in a number of different ways. So I'll stop and see if John or anyone else out there knows if anyone has any questions before we proceed.
I don't have anything. Let me check one more time. Yeah, I got everybody's in, so nope, we're good.
Okay. All right, so now we get into some of the multiple choice stuff, and that comes in different flavors. I'm not going to harp too much on that. I really want to talk about the type of question and how to interpret the question. And the first two examples that we have here is we have a runner on first base and second baseman allows a fair fly ball to be dropped untouched. That's one of the questions. A similar question that's in the exam is with runners on second and third, the pitcher intentionally drops a fair bunt in flight. Now, the first thing we need to know is both these situations are different. In our first situation, we have a forced situation because we have runners on first and second with less than 2 outs. We have 1 out. In our second question, we have runners on second and third. That is not a forced situation because the runners don't have to advance on any ball being put into play, unlike in our first question. So that's the first difference between the two. The second is in our first question, the second baseman allows the fair fly to drop untouched. Can he allow a fair fly? He's not required to catch it. So if the first baseman or the second baseman wants to allow the ball to drop, he's allowed to do that. So we have our search key untouched. If you want to go into the rule book and look, that's what I'd recommend for this question. And then if he's allowed to do that, again, you use your process of elimination. And I think what you would eventually come to believe is that, well, if he's allowed to have a touch, then A and B are non-starters because we're not going to declare the ball dead because the runner hasn't done any, or the second baseman hasn't done anything illegal. So we throw those two out. Now we're left with C and D, and we're going to award the batter runner, award the runner and the batter runner, award them 1 base. I don't know why we would do that. So now what's left is C, the ball's going to stay alive, and no one is yet out until a play is being made. So I think C would be a good choice for that one. The second question, runners on second and third, the pitcher intentionally drops a fair bunt in flight. Now, I will tell you guys, this question was on last year's exam. I believe this question was on other previous years' exam. So the issue here is the word intentionally. That could mean one of two things. It could mean that a player let the ball touch his glove and he knocked it down with his glove. He intentionally did that. Or the pitcher just stood there and he intentionally allowed the ball to drop, just like in our first question. I can tell you in years past, intentionally is the same as allow. So he's allowing, albeit intentionally. These two questions are the same. The situation's different, but the questions are the same. So if the questions are the same, and if the answer is C in our first example, where the ball is alive and no one is yet out, I don't know why we would not choose A, the ball remains live and in play. Because the two questions, again, this is due to exam history on several of us's part, that intentionally and allow are actually meaning the same thing. Poor choice of words for the exam people, but they are using it in the same way as allow. Our next series of questions has to do with a pop fly to third. And one of two things is happening. We have a runner on third. We have a pop fly in third base area that is prevented from being caught. In our first question, it is prevented from being caught by the runner. In our second question, it is prevented from being caught by the head coach. Now, I will tell you there are some anomalies in the exam. Not all exams are perfect. In our first question, the correct answer, to be honest with you guys, is to get the exam answer correct, it's going to be C, the batter is out, when in fact that is actually not how we would rule this in real life on a baseball field. If a runner prevents the third baseman from catching a pop fly around the third base area, then we're going to call the runner out. In the second question, same play, it's now prevented by the head coach. Okay, in that one, we're going to now call the batter out. So again, tests are not perfect. Why this is, in our first question, why it is the way it is, can't answer. But the correct test answer is C. Out on the field, we're going to declare the runner out. And then the second question, if it's prevented by the head coach, then we're going to call the batter out. All right, here are two more side-by-side comparisons of similar questions. In our first question, we have a runner on first base, batted ball, ground ball to the second baseman. The second baseman attempts to tag the runner advancing from first, but misses him. Then he throws to first base and it sails into the dugout. The batter, runner, and the runner are going to be awarded what? Before we answer, let's go to the second question. Similar, runner on first base, batted ball, hits the ground to the third baseman. He fields the ball and he immediately throws the ball to first base, but it sails into dead ball area. So in the two plays, we have a live ball, ground ball, batted ball to the infield. It's fielded by an infielder. In the first scenario, there's an attempted put out, then a throw to first, out of play, dead ball. In the second example, we have the ground ball fielded and it's immediately thrown to first base. So the purpose of these two questions is to make sure that we as umpires can distinguish between an initial throw by the fielder versus a second play by an infielder. So in our first example, the attempted tag represents the first play by the infielder. In our second example, the immediate throw to first represents the first play by our infielder. So as a result, we then have to distinguish who gets what in each case. Because we have the second attempt and then the throw over to first base, dead ball, out of play, that's going to be a two-base award from the time of the throw, not the time of the pitch. In our second example, because it is the first play by an infielder, the base award is from the time of pitch. So make sure we understand the distinction between the two. Okay? Before I get into here, I'll stop and see if anybody has any questions before we move on. Aaron or John, anything?
I'm looking in the chat to see if there's any questions. I don't see anything right offhand, unless John Owens has something.
I don't see anything either.
Okay. All right, then let's go ahead and continue. In the next series of questions, I have three of them. All of them have to do with follow-through interference. So this was covered in one of our earlier webinars. So let's go through each one of these. In our first question, we have a runner on second, B3 swings, misses the pitch for strike 2. That's important because remember, on any interference by the batter, whether if it's batter interference, whether if it's follow-through interference, what we rule will depend on the number of strikes and the status of the batter. So in our first question, strike 2, follow-through interference hits F2, who's attempting to throw out R2, who successfully steals third base. Well, we can't allow that to happen because we don't want to encourage all of our batters to continuously have follow-through if there's no penalty. So what we're going to do here, if you remember in our webinar for follow-through interference, it's going to be a delayed dead ball afford the catcher the opportunity for a put out. If you all remember, if the put out is successful, then the out stands and the follow through interference is ignored. But if the runner is declared safe, then we're going to call time. We're going to declare the batter out, and we're going to return the runner back to the base that he was at. So if you remember all that, then we should know that D, this is follow through interference. We're going to declare B3 out, and R2 is going to return to second base. We can't have a runner advance on any type of interference play. In our next two examples, just to highlight, we now have a strike three situation in both those examples. So let's look at our second example first. Again, we have R1 on first, gets a great jump. Pitcher moves and is sliding it to second when B2 swings and misses. For strike three, we have follow through, strikes the catcher. So now, unlike in our first question, this is now strike three. Our batter is out, but we still have follow through interference. So since the batter is already out, we now have to find where is the other out coming from, and the other out is going to come from the bases. So we're going to go ahead and declare our runner out, and now we have two outs. So if that's the case, since F2 had no possibility of play on R1, we're going to declare B2 out, and R1 is going to return to first base. In our third example, again, R1 on first base. He attempts to steal second. He's about halfway. B2 swings. Strike three. Follow through interference. This now causes the catcher to drop the ball. So now the catcher is put into a position where he can't make a play for a put out. So as the result of that, we're going to go ahead and declare the ball dead. B2 is guilty of interference. Since the pitch was a third strike, B2 interference prevented a possible double play. B2 and R1 are going to be declared out.
So repeat the second one again for me on that one. Because you
Sure.
said they were both out, and then you said they were going back to first. So is he
Let's
going
see.
back to first?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, this is another anomaly in the exam. The correct answer for the exam is since F2 had no possibility play on R1, B2 is declared out and R1 is returned to first. So that's another exam anomaly. We don't care whether if it's a great jump or not. I think that was the intent of the question. Does it matter if the batter only gets 10, or not the batter, the runner gets a 10-foot advance, a 20-foot advance, a 60-foot advance? We really don't care how far that runner has advanced. If we have batter interference and that batter strikes out, we're going to go ahead and acknowledge the strikeout on our batter, and we're going to get our second out. So that was the nuance. My bad. That was the nuance for that question. And there's actually a third question in the exam, which I think we'll get to, which is yet a third exam versus real life scenario. Thank you for picking that up.
No, thank you.
I think this is maybe one of the more simpler ones. Foul tip, batted ball that goes directly to the catcher's hands. We have multiple choice. The only point here is in order for D to be correct, both B and C must also be correct. Ball is a strike and the ball is in play. And B or C, it is legally caught by the catcher. So in this particular example, both statements are correct. So in order for D to be correct, both B and C would also have to be correct. Another example where we have multiple choices where both have to be correct. With a runner on third, pitcher stops his delivery because the batter stepped out of the box with 1 foot because the third base coach was giving him signs. I've seen that happen. So we have our multiple choices, A, B, C, and D. So if we were contemplating on D, we look at B. declare a balk and score the runner from third. C, declare an immediate strike on the batter. I don't think those two are correct. So if those two are not correct, then we're only left with one other alternative, which would be A. There is no penalty on either the batter or the pitcher. We're just going to call time and begin the play anew because both the batter and the pitcher had violated the rule. So here's an example where they're giving you a choice of B and C. B and C are not correct, so we choose A. The next set of questions has to deal with coach's conduct and warnings and ejections. And as we had seen earlier on in the spread of the number of questions, the majority of the questions in the exam are dealing with conduct related stuff. So here's what the Federation really wants us to do. And again, I believe Mike is a whole proponent of this. We use a graduated approach before we get to an ejection. You know, if we see unacceptable behavior, we may request the coach to cease and desist. If there's a repeat, we may remind, direct. Again, this is all dependent upon how this is delivered, what's delivered, and how it's delivered. After that, you have your written warning and you have your dugout arrest, and then you go to ejection. Is there an opportunity for us to immediately eject a player or coach? The answer is yes. But in order to do that, it has to be egregious from the word get-go. He gave us reason to go immediately to an ejection. Absent of that, we prefer the graduated approach, request, remind, written warning, which also includes a dugout arrest, and then ejection. So we try and do our best to use a graduated approach as often as possible. But then there are times when that's not possible. So let's go through a couple scenarios. We have the assistant coach leaves his dugout and loudly argues a call by the umpires on a play at the plate. We're offered a number of options here. The assistant coach and the head coach shall be immediately ejected. The assistant coach and the head coach shall receive written warnings and both restricted to the dugout for the duration of the game. If the actions are severe, he may be ejected and the head coach is still restricted to the dugout. I kind of, the immediate ejection, if I know if you had to be there, you could call it, but the way the question is worded, loudly argue, I'm not sure if that's an immediately ejected offense. So if I take that one off the table and I look at the other stuff, I kind of like B and C because both of them are correct. So if both of them are correct, I'd probably go with D. Both B and C are good answers. In our second example, we have assistant coach. Again, it's always the assistant coach occupying first base, and he's irate over an out call. And what does he do? He kicks the dirt. Well, okay, that's a fairly egregious offense. And as such, as we've just gone through our graduated approach, because he went VFR direct to a very egregious act, I think we would be within our rights that no written warning is required, and the head coach is restricted to the bench dugout for the remainder of the game. No one is ejected or restricted to the bench. A written warning may first be given. I don't think C would be a good answer because we are afforded the opportunity to eject without warning if the act is egregious, and I think everyone agreed that kicking the dirt is egregious. So we take C off the table. We're left with A and B, and I like both A and B. So for me, D would be a good answer because it combines all the things that we should be doing in A and B. And then our last example, again, I guess we have a bad assistant coach. We have extreme profanity. So just like in our second question, that's really non-negotiable. They've crossed the line immediately. Some of these questions or some of these answers are obviously not within the realm of possibility, like D, pretend we didn't hear the profanity. We can't do that. We have to act upon it. We have to act upon it right away. So for us, I think everyone would conclude that A would be the right answer. We're immediately going to eject the head coach because he left us no choice. He did something that went over the line, and the graduated approach is now off the table. So I'll stop there before we move to the next chart to see if there are any questions or comments.
John,
Hey,
I don't
Greg.
see anything.
Wait a minute, Greg. On last year's exam, which was question 37, your second example was listed. The correct answer was supposed to be both A and B. That's what the correct answer was on the website when I checked it last year.
Okay, I didn't say A and B for the second question.
No, you said something else, did you? Or did I miss it?
I apologize. I meant to say A and B for the second question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sweet.
Hey, Greg, I have a quick question. When we say that we're going to restrict the head coach to the dugout, that means that he can't coach third base anymore either?
That's correct.
Okay. And if
Now-
we do the head coach and the assistant coach are restricted to the dugouts, what would players have to coach first and third?
I've never had that happen. I believe a player can coach first and third. I've always seen three coaches in the dugout, so it doesn't
Okay.
matter. Yeah, I believe a player could coach.
Player
third
can
base.
coach bases as long as they are in a full helmet. They
Yeah.
can wear the temporary helmet, and they must be in full uniform.
Thank you, John. And as a sidebar, if we restrict a head coach to the dugout and their team is on defense and he wants to have a visit with the pitcher, he cannot go to the mound. That mound visit has to occur in front of the dugout. That's just a sidebar thing.
If I'm not,
Go ahead.
sorry, Greg, I was saying, coaches about that have been restricted to the dugout. If I'm not mistaken, they can come out for an injury. If they have a player that has been injured,
That is correct.
that's about the only reason they can come out, if I'm
No,
not
good.
mistaken.
Not talking.
No, you're
There's
correct.
something in the rule that says it, Chuck, that goes on to say something about the coach can only come out to assist the player with medical. It can't make a change. He can't do anything else while he's out there.
Right. Okay, our last, I think, question that has to do with behavior. Head coach has been complaining about the officiating for most of the game. Hopefully we would do something about that early on. Finally, in the sixth inning, the base umpire had enough and ejects the coach. Is this legal? So interpret the question. Obviously, the question doesn't state anything about a warning, which we should have done. If we have a coach who is complaining, we would shut that down as quickly as possible, and we wouldn't allow it to escalate. But here in our example, the umpire has had enough and ejects the coach. Well, if what he has done, he's sidestepped the graduated approach, and he's gone VFR direct to an ejection about complaining about the officials. Now, I'm not sure if complaining about the officials is a direct ejectionable offense. So he missed the graduated approach, and as part of the graduated approach, it would include a warning. So for me, the answer is funny. It says, no, a warning may be verbal or written. Some people have interpreted that one way, some people have interpreted that the other way, but the key here is that a warning may be verbal or written. He should have given a warning. So no, he shouldn't have ejected the coach. He should
Hey,
have
Greg.
issued a warning. Yes, sir.
in that type of situation, Mike and I have talked about that before. Restrict them to the dugout first if you can. And if the situation warrants it, then go ahead and eject them and then report into Mike.
Got it. So do your best in trying to use the graduated approach, which, as just mentioned, you know, the dugout arrest is the last step before an ejection. So if a coach is in dugout arrest, he has already been penalized for unacceptable behavior. More the starting pitcher is removed as pitcher in the third inning. Provided he has reentry eligibility, may return as another defensive position. He may return to pitch if he has reentry eligibility. He may return to pitch if he has reentry eligibility and his replacement has not done more than 8 warm-up throws. So again, this is another example of a multiple choice question. B is true if you want to also include C. We need to make sure that his removal was not in violation of a charge conference rule, then he would be eligible to return. And C, he may return to pitch if his reentry eligibility and his replacement is not required more than 8 warm-up throws. That is true. Those two are truer. A is not. So I like B and C because B and C are both true. And as I indicated earlier on in the start, if you're going to choose an answer like B and C, both B and C have to be correct in order for you to choose that option.
And Greg, just remember, Mike wants all the umpires to keep their, in a situation like that, if there's a possibility of coaches questioning lineup or whatever, make sure you keep all of your lineup cards through the end of the year. For every plate job you have, keep them just to be on the safe side.
Thank you. We already saw this question. If a player leaves the bench area during a fight, they're not allowed to do that. They're not. And there's only one option here. Answer A, he's going to be ejected. So this is being drilled into us both at the federation level and at the state level. These players cannot leave their respective positions to go to a fight area. They just can't. A nit here, team only has baseballs for the game that do not have the NOCSI seal. We all know that there's 2 seals on the baseball, the NOCSI seal and the Federation seal. If one or the other or both aren't there, look, we're not going to stop the game. We're not going to not do the game. There's travel, there's cost, there's time, there's effort. We're going to go ahead and do the game. And the only thing that you need to do, if for some reason you notice this, is just give Mike a call. And then Mike will take it from there. Other than that, we need to have the game proceed as normal. The next couple of charts deal with some multiple choice.
Greg,
Go
you
ahead.
got a question from Phil. Phil, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, this goes back to the probably about 10 or 15 minutes ago on the intentional drop ball, Greg.
Yes, sir.
So I thought that the fielder could not intentionally drop a ball, that there was some penalty to it. So for example, if you had a runner on first, pop fly second base, I know it's not infield fly situation, but you know, he's looking up at it, he's right underneath it, and he takes his head off the ball and looks at the runner and lets the ball drop. That's allowed?
Yes, it is. For both those questions where they use the actual word allow, and in the second question they use the word intentional. Unfortunately, intentional can mean one of 2 things. He knocked the ball down intentionally to seek a better play, or he did not choose to catch it, which he has every right to do. So Federation uses the word intentional, and the only thing I can tell you is that I've taken the exam a number of times. This question has always come up, and I believe the intent for the definition of that question, intent just means he allowed it to drop, just like in the first question.
Okay. Thank
But
you.
if he puts a glove on it
Yeah.
and he knocks it down, okay, that's a different story.
Right. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Just be careful. Some of the questions may include options to select multiple choice. A single choice option could be the right answer. So just because we have an option D here, which is B and C, remember, if we wanted to choose B and C, both B and C had to be correct. After a home run, a teammate comes out of the area around home plate, high fives, okay. Celebrating player taunts the catcher. A, are we going to immediately eject the player? I think we would all agree it's not an ejectable offense. B, it's a minor offense. Okay, yeah, I kind of believe that. C, the player is immediately restricted to the bench because of the warning. No, that's not a warning offense if it's minor. So I've eliminated A and I've eliminated C. And if C is not an answer, then D by default is not an answer. So what's left? B. It's a minor thing. We'll take some corrective action, and if it's repeated, then we have an ejection.
Hey, Greg.
Go ahead.
We had this issue in other sports. So just as a reminder, when you're taking this test, do not look at the COVID protocols. The COVID protocols are by the state's request only. Each state has different COVID protocols. This is a national federation exam. Only use your rule book for this. Do not go to the COVID rule book.
Thanks, John. Okay, there are other multiple choice answers where all correct choices are correct, and this is just an example of one of those. Pitcher assumes a wind-up position win, hands together in front, hands are at his side, hands in front of the body, and the other hand is at his side. I think we've all been around long enough to know that A, B, and C are all correct, so if that's the case, then D, all the above would be the correct answer. The ball becomes dead when time is taken to, obviously when we do awards, when we do an intentional base on balls, and when we impose penalties for base running. Again, all of those are correct, so we would choose D for that answer. So just remember, if you want to choose all of the above, just make sure that A, B, and C are all correct. And with that, I think that's it. The only thing I want to mention is for those of you, when we start taking the exam, you're more than welcome to call me or call anyone else, any one of your friends, but I'd be more than happy to help anyone. If you want to send me an email, send me a text, or call me, that's fine. I'd be more than happy to help. Exam comes out tomorrow. I hope to take it tomorrow. I hope to finish it tomorrow and move on. And with that, I'll see if there are any other more questions. If not, I'll turn it back over to John. And I know our next session is at 9 o'clock.
Any questions, guys?
How's it going? My name is Alex Hovius. I'm a new official this year. I didn't receive a rule book. I have been in talk with Mike, and I had moved a couple times within the area. I live in Pinehurst, and I never received a rule book. Would I reach out to Mike for that, or how does that work?
I'll put an email in the chat where you can email the state. For the test, if you wanted to take it quickly, I would go into if you have a way of downloading an app, do the NFHS rules app, and then sign in with the account that you use for Dragonfly, and that will give you a rule book on your mobile device or iPad. But I'll shoot you the lady's name who does that for the state. Give me 1 second. I'll put that email in the chat box.
Roger, I understand. Thank you. And with me being a new official, I don't know if anybody is interested in possibly. I'm in no rush to take the test. Obviously, I want to take it before the due date of it. But if anybody would possibly want to meet, if in the Southern Pines or Pinehurst area, that's a seasoned official, possibly sit down with me, help me out with just some of the basic rules, things you need to know. I just want to make sure I go into this. I've been officiating for about almost 10 years, but basketball and water polo. This is my first year of baseball.
This is Greg McAvoy. I put up on my screen my email address. So as John indicated, you have multiple avenues for you to go out and get a soft copy version. Another avenue available to you, if you would like it, is you can send me an email and I can send you a soft copy PDF of the rule book. Unfortunately, the case book, they only have hard copies and you'd have to go to the Federation for that. But you can get through the exam with just the rule book. So you're more than welcome to do that. And I will also offer, if you would like to have a Zoom meeting, I'd be more than happy to have a Zoom meeting with you or with anyone out there if anyone wants to go through their exam.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it.
The email I just posted is the lady you would contact to get a rule book.
Understood. Thank you.
That's all I have, John.
All right, guys. I'll go ahead, Steven.
I couldn't get on